Hi guys, today I'm going to show you how to convert hair from Genesis to Poser. Those of you who have been around for a while might recall that in the early days of Genesis, I believe up until and including version 2, there was a program called the DAZ Importer which plugged into Poser and enabled you to import Genesis figures directly into Poser. It was a little bit clunky, but it was better than no solution, and it kept morphs and stuff like that, I think. Now the thing about Genesis figures is they have their own rigging and all kinds of special things. But the good news is when it comes to hair is still basically a prop with some prop morphs. So it's very easy for you to reconstruct in Poser. And so what I'm going to do is show you how to do it. There are some other solutions to this. I'm not going to go into detail on those today, but what we're going to be doing is we're going to be converting this hair called Jonas hair. I believe it's a unisex hair, but for Genesis 3 males. And you see here compatible software, everything but Poser basically. Everything that DAZ can plug into. It's a bit frustrating, but doesn't matter. We can easily import this into Poser and have some more. So just get rid of that. So here I am in DAZ Studio, and in my content library, here's Jonas hair. So I'm going to double click that. I'm not going to have a figure loaded. That just complicates things. So I'm just going to double click to load Jonas hair, and it imports with the default material and also the default position. So this is set roughly for the height of the DAZ figures, and we're ready to export this already. Now before we export, what I suggest you do is go to the materials tab, and if there's a choice, a lot of modern hairstyles only come with iRay materials, which is the more modern physically based rendering PBR materials, that they produce much better results. But for compatibility, especially with the 3D Light renderer, there's also a bunch of 3D Light materials. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a 3D Light material here. So I'm going to add Jonas hair 1, and I'm going to double click there to add it here. So you saw that slightly went darker as I added that. Now there's a very important reason for that, and that's the way the materials are constructed. So if I go down here to the Surfaces tab in DAZ Studio, and you'll see here the different components or elements of this hairstyle. So it has curls 1, curls 2, curls long, finer, flick, scalp, and solid. And to my mind, this is a really well constructed hairstyle because all of these different parts enable you to create highlights and different textures in different parts, just to create a much more natural hairstyle. So if I click here on curls 1, you'll see the material model that's used. So this 3D Light material model is slightly different constructed to an iRay material model, and when we bring this into Poser, it will be just a little tiny bit easier to reconstruct in Poser. Not an awful lot, but just a bit. So what we're going to do, we're going to take this hair model here, and we're going to go to export. So making sure that's selected over here. This is why it's better off not to have any other elements in the scene when you do this. It just keeps it simple. Export, and we're going to select wavefront object, and you're going to export it to a directory of your choosing in the geometries directory. Now I've created for this a tutorials directory, then within that I have runtime, and then within runtime a geometries directory, and then within that I've created a Jonas hair, and I've already exported some stuff earlier, but I'll do it again just to show you some important things. So we could type at the bottom here. I'm just going to click on this to pick up the name. So the hairstyle is called Jonas hair, so let's just leave it at that, and then I click save. It's just telling me that I'm going to overwrite it. That's fine. Now when we go to export in the OBJ, make sure that we choose Poser from this convert from drop down, because that will set the correct scale so that when it goes into Poser, it's the right scale for Poser to look the same as it is in DAZ Studio. And all of these other things, just copy my setup there, well, the ticks and selections there, and then we're just going to click OK or accept. And that takes a little while. Now this hairstyle is what's known as a billboard hairstyle, which means if I zoom in on it, and view it. In fact, it'll be easier to show you in Poser. So if I go to Poser now and do import wavefront OBJ, 100%. Now I want to turn off centered and place on floor. That means that when it comes into the scene, it will be in the same relative position as it was in the previous scene. So in DAZ Studio, it was at head height. So when I do that and then choose Jonah's hair, that will come in at approximately head height. Now, I believe DAZ Studio figures are a little tiny bit, a little bit smaller, and smaller than Michael 4, and the new Hom figure from Renderosity is about 6'6". Michael 4 is about 6'1". And I don't know what the Genesis figures are, but this comes in low anyway. So here's the figure that I've imported, and before we can do anything, I have two tasks that we need to do. We need to convert the materials, and we need to add the morphs. So let's do the morphs first. So let's go back to DAZ Studio, and now this is really, really important. I'm going to click on the shaping tab, and here all of the morphs for this figure are available. So I'm going to choose one of the morphs that's going to be nice and visible. So let's see, adjust forehead in out. I know that I haven't created one for that, so let's give that a try to see. Okay, you see that's pulling the forehead in and out there. So this particular one, I'm just going to undo to set that back to 0. Right, so this particular one has a midpoint position, so it goes plus and minus. A lot of them start from 0 and go up to 100%, but it doesn't matter. I'm just going to move this up to 100%, and then I'm going to export this hair again. So now it's going to be exported in the new position, which means that it will serve as a morph target. So what's that called? That's called adjust forehead in and out. So I've just made it go out, so I'm going to call that adjust forehead. Okay, I'll call that in and out for now. In and out. Remember, so you want to use the same names here, so it will make sense in Poser. So adjust forehead in out. Leave the settings the same. And now if I go to Poser, I'm just going to turn that around so we're seeing it from the same angle roughly. I can now import that, so I'm going to go object. This is considered to be an object at the moment. It doesn't know it's a hair object. Whenever you import an OBJ, it doesn't know if it's a prop, a hair object, a figure or whatever until you give it that designation. So I'm going to go object, load morph target. I'm not going to give it a label. I'm going to let it pick one up from the name. So adjust forehead in out is the one that we just created. And then I'm just going to click OK. And that has now created a morph here, which with any luck, you'll see that adjusts that outwards. And I can go to minus value to go inwards. So I'm just going to Z that. Now, let's export another morph, and there's a reason for that. So before we can do another morph, we need to reset this back to where it was. So I'll do 0 there. So that's the midpoint, because otherwise what you'll be doing is exporting a compound morph. So let's say adjust, let's see, neck in and out. So we'll adjust this 100%. That's very subtle, to be honest, but okay, 100%. So adjust neck in and out. Export as we did before. And adjust neck in out. Now if I was converting this for my own use, I'd be more methodical and I'd start from the bottom and work my way up. There's a reason for doing it in reverse order, and you'll see here, and that is that when I add the morphs, that each new morph I add goes above the one before. So if I do it in reverse order, they'll be in the correct position. So here, object, load morph target, don't change the name, and we want adjust, what was it, neck in and out. Complicated hairstyles can quickly become quite heavy with all of the morphs. So here we go. Now adjust neck in and out has gone above. That's actually alphabetically a lower position. So what I could do is I could just drag this one up and arrange it there. But if you just with a little planning, you can have them in the correct order in the first place. Okay, so imagine that I've gone through now and I've converted all of my morphs from DAZ Studio. Let's just save that so that I don't risk losing work in progress. Always a good habit. I don't like to use autosave because as your files get larger, that can be quite intrusive of your workflow, but obviously saving often is a good idea. So now the next stage is to add material. So if you look at the materials in DAZ Studio, you'll see that these are quite wispy, and that's because I have transparency. Whereas if you look at the material in Poser, although the shapes are there, the hair has no transparency, and that's because the export format has only added the material to the specular and the diffuse channel. So here's a little trick. We're just going to create some new nodes. Actually, before I do that, let me work out how many nodes I need to create. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to surfaces and I'm going to have a look at the components of the material that I want to save. So I've got base color, well that's already been converted across, that's the diffuse. Translucency color, that's 2. We could do glossy color, but we're going to do specular, so we're going to ignore that one. Bump map, that's 3. Top coat, we're not going to bother about that. Cutout, that's transparency, that's 4. Displacement strength, I don't really bother with displacement, but we'll do this just for the sake of completeness. That's 5, and that's it. So we need 5 nodes in Poser. So we're going to go new node, 2D textures, image map. Then I'm just going to grab that, copy, Control C, Control V to paste, kind of dragging into the proximate area where I'm going to use them. Control V to paste again. So it's just copying image map 2. Don't worry that they all have the same name. Control V to post one more time. And now we can move them roughly where we need them. So by far the most important one with hair is going to be the transparency. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, before I start doing the materials, it's super important that you add your DAZ Studio library or DAZ Studio Runtime. So here's my DAZ Studio Runtime. So you can just click on this button to add the DAZ Studio Runtime, and then you can navigate to wherever your DAZ Studio Runtime is stored. And the reason that's vital is that it enables the program to automatically find the materials when you load your converted hair. I should have actually done that before I imported the hair, to be honest. Okay, so let's go back to the materials. And we're going to name these. So I'm going to double click on the name just for clarity for your benefit. And you will see why that's really important in a minute. So transparency, and I'm going to drag that across to transparency. Then we'll call this one specular. Specular. And we're going to drag that across to here. Now you'll see by default it just uses the color as the color map as a specular. Don't know why it does that, but we're going to override that. Okay. Then we're going to do bump over here and displacement. Okay. Things become complicated with displacement if you're going to use Superfly. If you're going to use Firefly rendering engine, it's really easy to do. With Superfly it becomes a bit more complicated. So what I'm going to do now then is I'm going to click on this to see where the textures are. So remember, this has already loaded the color texture, the diffuse color. So I'm going to click to see where that is, and I'm going to browse and pick up this path name. So you see this is where my DAZ Studio library is. Program files, my DAZ 3D library, blah, 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 blah. So I'm going to copy that from there because I'm then going to paste it into any other fields that I need. So transparency first, that's the important one. Click, browse. Okay, it's already defaulted to there, that's fine. Okay, so I need a transparency map. So I'm in scalp. Okay, so I'm looking here, transparency map scalp. And I could confirm that if it wasn't so obvious, if it was, you know, hair 6 or something, and it might be using a shared transparency map, what I would do is I'd go back to here and I'd click on, let's say, finer. So what's a transparency map for finer? I have no idea. So click on finer, and then I find cutout opacity, click on that, and you'll see here Jonas curls is the transparency map for that. Okay, so that's just, you know, that's one way of figuring it out. Okay, so you will be doing a lot of back and forwardsing between your DAZ Studio and your poser, by the way. So we've got a transparency map for the scalp. Unfortunately, I've chosen a part that's not going to be very visible, but it doesn't matter. So specular color now. This is rather weird. So I click on scalp, and if I go to specular, where's specular? Okay, there isn't a specular color for scalp, probably because it's not going to be very visible. Let's do it with curls instead. So with curls, there's a specular color somewhere. Have I gone past it? I think I must have done. Can't see it. Okay, I'm thinking maybe I haven't added this texture properly, so it's not a 3D light texture. Let me try that again. Here we go, specular color. So the specular color is a grayscale map. That's really weird. Sorry, that's specular 2. Let's go up to specular 1. A grayscale map. But there's also a color here. So this is the bit that I need, is the color. Okay, so the map is dictating. Oh, for goodness sakes, Matt. The map dictates the color, and the grayscale map dictates what of that color can be seen, and then beneath that is the strength, how much the specular applies. So we know that the specular filter map is called S Jonas hair, or specular Jonas hair, and the color is this RGB value here, which is 173.161.131. 173.161.131. So now I'm going to go to here, and I'm going to click. Sorry, I'm clicking stuff without letting you know. I'm going to click this specular box here. Then I'm going to click this color picker, and now I'm going to enter that value into the RGB. 173.161.131, and I'm tabbing between the fields there. So that value there, 173.161.131, which you can see here, should be the same as the DAZ. 173.161.131, same color here. Okay, so, and then I'm just going to click OK, and that color now moves into there. But the specular map in here, so we've got Jonas S, was it? S Jonas hair here. This acts as a filter, so this specular map only shows in a certain area. So where it's black it doesn't show, where it's white it does show. It's a kind of a weird way of doing it, I guess. There is a reason for it, and I don't know if you can figure out what that reason is, but what it is that this creator is using this specular color to change basically the highlights of this hair. If they had, you might think at first, well, why didn't they just create a specular map of that color and plug that into a white specular color here? And the reason is that they'd need a separate specular map for every single color that they wanted to do. Now, the odd thing is that obviously they've created a separate color map here for all of the different hair types, so I don't know why they didn't go to that trouble. But by having the specular color determined by the color picker, it enables you to create a much wider range of specular color effects. So if you wanted to do, say it was in a blue light or something, you could just change the specular color and get a different effect. Personally, I don't think you should ever do anything with the specular color. I think the specular color should always be white, and let the in a physically based rendering, the specular color should be picked up by the rendering engine picking up the reflections off the lights, if that makes sense. You shouldn't override them. This is basically the equivalent of baking in a specular color, and it can be a real nuisance. Supposing this was, you made this blue because it was meant to be in a blue light, and then you go to a white room, then that specular would be reflecting the wrong color. So this was a clunky way of doing it. They should have just left this specular to white. But anyway, doesn't matter. We've plugged in the specular there, and the amount, again, we could use this, but I'm just going to leave that to, what did it say, 73? 72.8, an oddly specific amount. I'm fairly sure you wouldn't notice a difference between 72.8 and 73. However, with DAZ, they have percentages, 0 to 100% and minus 0, and 0 to minus 100%. In Poser, you have 0 to infinity. But really think of it as 1 being 100% and 0 being 0%. So 72.8% would be 0.728. I'm going to call it 0.73, and I'm pretty sure even 0.7 to 73 is not going to make any difference. So that's a level of specular there. Now we're in the scalp at the moment, so this will become clear later. Okay. In fact, I am just going to copy all of those. So there's two ways I could, let me go back a step. The reason that I created all of these first was that I'm going to copy them to all of the other hair elements. So here we've got curls 2, curls long, finer, blah, blah, blah. Preview is a poser thing. That's just the default. You don't ever worry about that. So let me just explain that what I want to do is create a material template here that I can then copy to all of these. And there's two ways you can do that. You can do copy here, and it'll copy all of these, and then let's say if I go to curls now, select these two or whatever happened to be there and do replace. Okay, that didn't copy properly. Let's go back to scalp. Can't have all been selected, so let's do select all, copy, curls 1, select all, replace. That's better. Okay. Sometimes you unselect as you go to select another one. I did a marquee select there, by the way, which is left click and drag to select them all. Or you can just do, as I said, right click on poser surface node, do select all, and that will grab them all. Okay, so by doing it this way, it replaces whatever was there. But if I choose this, let's do Control A. Oops, not Control A. Select all. Look, I've sent that away now. I've done whatever I've done there. Change the camera. So I'm just going to undo that. There we go. I've got them all selected. Now, if I go here, I could do apply to all here. But the problem with apply to all, if I go to curls 2, you'll see that the previous texture is still underneath. So it's a real pain in the butt. It's nice if you want to copy names across, but it's a pain if you want a clean replace. But the quick way to tidy that up is just remove detached nodes over here in the macros. Okay, but now you'll see every single one of these has got that same layout. Remove detached nodes again. Ready for me to start filling in the detail. So I'm actually going to go to curls instead. So curls 1. So what texture do I need for curls 1? So let me go back to here. Choose curls 1, and the diffuse texture is Jonas hair, 01 Jonas hair. So I'm going to go here. Not Jonas scalp. 01 Jonas hair. Transparency. Not Jonas scalp. There's only one other transparency map I seem to recall. TTT, yep, Jonas curls. Oh no, there is two actually, but I think it's this one. Let me just confirm. Yep, Jonas curls. Going to copy that across. Then I'm going to go through now. When it comes to okay, I'll do the specular first. Specular color, specular Jonas hair, which is what I'm already using. When it comes to displacement and bump map, it's very common that you'll just have one set of displacement and bump that serve for all of the different material parts within an object. So all of these, except preview, could use the same specular and bump. So you'll often get away with just being able to use the same thing. So here, let's browse that. So what are we doing? We're doing displacement. So what's a displacement map called? Displacement. Here you go. Look, it's the only thing starting with a D. So I do displacement. We have no idea what value to do because Poser's got such a completely lunatic displacement values. And that's just one of the problems with displacement. And bump. Are there multiple bump maps? Another grayscale or black and white one. Bump. There are two, but one is for the scalp. So we're just going to use this one. Again, I could go to the DAZ Studio thing and work it out that way. So now I have my first hair set up. The last thing to do is just to set the transparency value here to 1. So that means 100% transparency applied, except in the areas showed by the transparency map. Right, so now in this particular case, I happen to know that curls 2 and finer and stuff like that also use the same exact pattern. So I can copy and replace that finished texture across like that. And there's something there that's gone white. I don't know what that... Oh, that was finer, wasn't it? Get rid of those spares. Nope. Okay. Okay, well, let's find out what that white bit is. Click on that with the eyedropper. Oh yeah, it is finer. Okay, I'm just going to replace that. Oh yeah, because it's putting the scalp in, that's why. Replace. Okay, that's looking better. Curls long. Oh, how annoying. I'm going to replace the root node and then just get rid of those detached nodes. There you go. Carry on working through. Flicks. Going to select all of these. I could manually just change the details instead. Or I could have added the bump and the displacement before I came on to do this and set the transparency. That would have been a better option. And what's the last bit? Solid. I have no idea what that is, but I'm just going to assume that that's the same texture. Okay, there you go. So that's looking good already. So let's have a comparison now. So there's that. Look at the wispy transparency on the hair now. Unfortunately, Poser's transparency rendering is very, very slow, but that's looking pretty good actually. Compare that to DAZ Studio. DAZ Studio is a little bit more dense. Oops, that's rendering. Didn't mean to do that. And the hair's a bit bigger because we changed the forehead size in the morphs. But if I just give that a quick render, Okay, so that's pretty usable. Now, what you would want to do is spend some time messing about with the bump and the displacement, trying to find the right scale. Now, you may recall that we said that there were some special situations with displacement if you're going to use Superfly rendering engine. I definitely recommend that you do use Superfly, but if you're going to, then there are a few things that you need to do, a few stages that you need to go through. So I might mess about with that specular just to get that a little bit shiny. I might even set up an alternate specular there. We're not going to talk about that today much. I talked about alternate specular in my node video, and you can go into that and find out what the alternate specular, how they can give you much more realistic specularity or shine effects on hair. But for now, we're just keeping it simple. And you can see that's kind of coming through okay. Right, so I'm just going to interrupt that. So, okay, so that's just hanging in space. It needs a better transparency on the scalp. But now we need to apply it to a figure. So I'm just going to grab my figure here. My male figure. Here we go. Michael. I'm going to load him into the scene. Now, in general, hair that was created for figures above Michael 4, so that would be Genesis, Lom, Genesis 2, 3 or 4, all of those, the hair tends to be a little bit smaller, so you need to, and you see there straight away, that's kind of, it's loaded in too low. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this hair figure, if I can select it, Jonas hair, and I'm going to move it into position. So looking at it from the side is probably the best way of doing it, so because you can see the ear cut out here. So I'm going to move that scalp transparency needs adjustment, by the way. I'm going to move that up, needs a bit of Z, and now you can see that the scalp is not showing through at all, which means that the hair is too small. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the overall scale. Okay, so the overall scale there now is too big. Let me, well, not by much, but if you look on the sides here, you will see that the scalp is kind of out to the sides. Let me adjust that even a little bit more. See there's space between the scalp and the temples of the figure. So let me just scale that down a bit. So that's 108, which is actually on the small side generally. But I'm just going to scale that down. And I could adjust the X and Z values. See here now the scalp is missing. Now I could change the Z scale independently, or just the X scale slightly, and so I don't have to scale everything, because it was getting quite tall. I don't have to scale everything together. There you go. So that's getting quite nice now. The nape of the neck's looking quite good. The ear cutaway is quite good. The front of the head's looking quite good. They're the main areas that you want to be looking at when adjusting hair from other figures. There we go. So now that nape's working. Now I haven't done the transparency on the scalp. Let me just do that, because that's I plugged it in, but I didn't put the transparency. So Jonas scalp, yep. Transparency, Jonas scalp, yep. But I didn't make it work, and there you go. Now you look how much better that looks. See, that transparency is working now. And I could still adjust that a little bit more, but what we're going to do now, this is a really important stage. So at the moment, this hair is just considered to be an object that happens to be in the same place as the hair would be on that figure. So all we're going to do is we're going to reparent this. So make sure you've selected the hair. See it showing up there. And I'm going to do Object, Change Parent, and I'm going to change the parent to Michael Forehead, or whatever figure you're parenting to. It could even be Victoria. And that's parented, so that means that hair will now go wherever the head goes, And it's still considered to be an object. It could be glasses, it could be a hat, whatever. It's parented exactly like them. But what I'm going to do, and this is where the final little bit of magic happens, I'm going to go to my tutorials directory in hair. Okay, I actually created one earlier, but I'm gonna do it again just for the point. And I'm going to add to library Jonas hair tutorial. And that's saved that there with a little thumbnail. We talked the other day about how you can make your own thumbnails, I believe. Okay, so using I've forgotten what it's called now. P2R or something is it called? I can't remember. Anyway, it's irrelevant. Right. Now if I delete the hair from here and now double click this just to check. It's loaded into the scene. It's loaded at the correct place. Obviously, I could have tweaked that a bit more to get that scalp perfect. And we can check it's in the correct place by checking the neck, selecting the neck or the head, and move it. And you see the hairstyle moves with it. So the last thing that you might want to do is to save this default material in the materials. So you'd create a folder here called Jonas hair, for example, and then save that material, and then you could recreate each of these colors. So suppose we were going to do this red hair, double click this, it's turned it red, and then you'd slowly work through these different values to just double check, you know, the specular value and whatever. Usually it's just the diffuse and the translucent colors that change. Let me have a look at, yep, and the translucent has changed as well. Oh, I forgot to add a translucent map to that hair as well. You very rarely see them impose a hair, but I could have gone to the trouble. But there you go, guys. So that's how you bring a hair, complete with its morphs. And the morphs, remember, are shown down here. Complete with morphs into Poser. Now it's as good in Poser as it was in DAZ Studio. So I hope that you find that useful. And happy posing.